ready?
Got open man. DJ Moore. End zone. Touchdown. Touchdown Bears.
I am Jeff Joniak.
Blitz is on. Down he goes. Oscar.
What was it like playing for Coach Ditka?
I don't want to answer any questions like that.
Pressure coming. He's in big trouble. Down he goes. Montez Sweat.
And
Now, Bears Etc. brought to you by Miller Lite with the voices of the Bears, Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer.
Well, we hit the tape and crossed the finish line covering the NFL Draft and the Bears adding weapons that will impact the 2025 Bears season in so many ways, certainly in the locker room and on the field in all three phases. Welcome into our draft recap on episode 141 of the Bears Etc. podcast with Super Bowl winning Bears guard Tom Thayer. I'm Jeff Joniak. We're brought to you by Miller Lite. Thanks to our producer, Katie Fox, for all her help this weekend. On tap for this episode, a breakdown of the picks and how they impact the roster and depth chart in advance of the minicamp and OTA portion of the offseason program. Tom, interesting selections indeed. I know I mentioned depth chart. That's one thing. There's no depth chart right now.
Well, Dennis Allen said the same thing when we got to meet all the assistant coaches. There's a first team that's going to go out there at practices, but there's not necessarily a depth chart. So you're going to have to earn your way onto that depth chart and then impress the coaches enough that they get an opinion of you so they know exactly where to place you. Before the draft started, to me, I just like the fact that all of these scouts, Ryan Poles and his staff, they all have to have a crystal ball, because it's not necessarily what can you do for me right now, but what can you develop into in the future. And so when I look at some of the pieces they brought aboard, I think there's something for everybody here, whether you're an assistant coach like Antoine Randall L. or Al Harris, a defensive coordinator like Dennis Allen, or a head coach and the organizer of the offense like Ben Johnson.
We had the Miller Lite Chicago Bears draft party back at Soldier Field on Thursday night, Tommy. We celebrated the 10th pick, Coloulston Lovelin, and enjoyed the live draft coverage and analysis. There were on-field activities. There was the locker room tour. They had a closeout sale and more. Hey, Tommy, it was a fun time. It was all sponsored by Miller Lite, and I think they got a great taste of what the Bears are building right here.
You know, one thing about that draft party, the biggest thrill to me is when we get to re-interview a guy like Devin Hester, because you and I, through the process of his growth and development of as a young man to an adult, you can see the change in the confidence and why he was so successful throughout his career. And I really enjoyed interviewing these guys that come back. But then again, we get to interview Rome Odunze for the second year, and you get to see what a mature guy that he is and how he's going to benefit the position, the locker room, and everybody at his position. And TJ Edwards, what the heck? Here's a guy that just got a new contract and extension. That's a Chicagoland guy that belongs in that locker room and on that team, and he's lived by example. So of all the friendly faces that we get to see out in the crowd, it's really neat to me when we get to re-interview guys and you can see their growth as a person.
Yeah, I got to thank ESPN 1000 with Watto and Sylvie helping us out as well on the draft party and a part of their coverage as well for some 8 hours. It was a labor of love, no question about it, and great job, Caitlin Zickel, Bobby Hack for the presentation and help along the way. Paul Zarang, our engineer as well, did an outstanding job. A lot goes into that for sure for that one night. All right, let's look at what was addressed as the status at Hallis kicks in here. 3 offensive additions, Tommy, in the first 3 picks. 3 of the top 56 selected in the 2025 draft. And Michigan tight end Coloulston Lovelin was first on that list at number 10. The way the draft fell, the Bears had choices there. You had a couple tight ends. You had other players at other positions that they could have easily gone in that direction, but they clearly fell in love with this player and introducing himself to us right there on draft night and then getting to sit with him one-on-one later at Hallis Hall on Friday. I can see why they like this guy. You, though, break down the tape. You look at the player first and the personality second. What do you see from this almost 6'6", 250-pound tight end?
You know, WWBD. What would Ben do? I can't help but think the growth of the Detroit Lions and what Ben did there with the personnel that he had under his guidance and how he was able to develop it. This is a young guy. He's big. He still has potential ahead of him. Where do you want him on the inline line of scrimmage? Do you want him lined up a little bit to the outside to take advantage of a size mismatch? So when I think about what Ben Johnson can do with this tight end position and how how it can complement the overall performance of the entire offense. I can't wait to see this guy grow step by step throughout mini camps, OTAs, into training camp, and throughout the regular season.
Well, Ryan Poles has a great staff along with Ian Cunningham, but also the Senior Director of Player Personnel, Jeff King. Let's listen in to his observations on the new tight end for the Bears, Coloulston Lovelin.
You're adding a guy that's probably a culture changer. That's how we felt about him. So tough, smart, dependable, consistent. All the things that coach preaches, like this kid embodies. The more that we spent time with Coloulston, the more we just felt like he was the pick for us. We're adding somebody to our offense that we have conviction on, a really good vision for. Obviously, all of us being aligned with the pick. Just somebody that we're super excited to add. The versatility, what you can do with Coloulston and Cole, how they mesh together, I think is going to be something that, we can build upon for the next few years.
Some of the things, you could hear the excitement in his voice, Tommy, but the things that really stick out for me, and you've touched on some of them, but the separation at the top of the route. When you go back and watch his highlights and how he gets open, it's effortless. He's got the hip swivel. He's got the ability to stick his foot in the ground and make sharp cuts. And that creates a lot of openings for him and an easy target for the quarterback, but it's also physicality at the catch point, rugged after the catch. And they really believe that his hips are able to allow him to really develop as an inline blocker when necessary. And that's not always easy for taller people, but at the tight end position, if you want to keep your defense on their heels, you gotta be able to do both and put them on edge.
Well, there's a couple things about Lovelin. First of all, I'm playing in the Big Ten in an outdoor stadium a majority of the time, either at home supportive crowds or loud crowds on the road. That's not something that you're going to have to develop with him throughout time. He understands crowd noise and all that. And then you talk about his ability to swivel his hips to get into the blocks, and he's got the length in order to get his hands inside properly, and he's got the feet and lower body power to be a blocker at the point of attack, to be a blocker on the backside, fullback, H-back, wherever they want to line him up. He's got a vertical jump and a catch radius that is almost going to be unmatchable. There's not a lot of 6'5" cover guys out there. And so when you put Lovelin in a catchable position, whether it's on the line for play action, whether it's to the outside on third down, in red zone. So he brings a lot of assets as a receiver, and now you got to take that time to develop him as the blocker he needs to be in the NFL in order to be and create more deception on the line of scrimmage.
Tom, I know you've done a lot of hard work in your life, both in the weight room and just being a Thayer, but right. I'm certain you haven't put in wire fencing.
I have not. Listen, when I was reading about him and you think about the work ethic that was instilled in him on a farm to support his family and help out when they needed those types of things, I'm glad he referenced back to thanking them for that, because there's a lot of people that would have that hard upbringing and want to get out of the house as quickly as possible. I think the reason that he was considered and to develop that work ethic into where he was picked, it's because of some of the things that he had to do in his upbringing.
And now let's talk about the pairing, because we talk about 12 personnel. That's one back, two tight ends. That means Cole Kmet. And I don't want people to think that this means that Cole Kmet is being marginalized in any way, shape, or form. It's going to enhance Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet will enhance Coloulston Lovelin. The pair, and we've seen plenty of evidence in the history of the NFL where two tight ends can be quite the dynamic duo to really keep defenses stressed at all times. I think this is going to help Cole Kmet. You tell me in what ways it will.
All right, so first of all, the first thing a defensive coordinator does when they're playing against an opponent, they look at the personnel that's coming onto the field. So now you got Lovelin on one side and Cole on the other. And now they're calling about the defense that they want to go against. So all of a sudden they break the huddle, and now Lovelin's lined up as a wide receiver. they're scratching their head going, oh my God, I got linebackers in the game, and now I got to cover Coloulston with a linebacker that I know can't cover him. So it's like I talked about, the deception at the line of scrimmage. You can put him in the game, but there's no guarantee where he's going to line up, or vice versa. You put Coloulston on the line of scrimmage and you put Cole outside. So they're really versatile athletes, and so they can do a lot to kind of encourage the defense to put the personnel to match up with a 2 tight end set when one of them's not lining up as a tight end.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, like I said, whether it's the red zone, third down, first down, now you're trying to think, hey, how can we devise a scheme to line up against these two guys?
Potentially, can we see a lot of big nickel put in the lineup? Because just a traditional nickel, there's not a lot of big nickels. They're diminutive, most of them. They're on the smaller side. That doesn't mean they're not physical and can be nasty and win the battle, but more often than not, like you said, because this is a 3-level, both of these guys are 3-level players. Hand in the dirt, catch the pass, also reach up and get the pass because of the wingspan. So that you're talking about a really difficult assignment to deal with all that.
And let's not ignore DJ and Rome and the rest of the receivers, because Rome is a big guy. He was sitting there on stage with us on Thursday night, and you kind of realize when you stand there eye to eye with him what a big receiver he is. And Antoine's talked about that as well. And we all know what a great catcher and how tough of a guy DJ is. So when you think about putting those types of receivers out there, man, you can have a big nickel, you can have a wide 4 receivers. Really, you can do anything you want with the tight ends and the wide receivers, because I believe they're all interchangeable. We've seen DJ out of the backfield. We've seen Rome take jet sweeps. We've seen Cole Kmet take snaps behind the line of scrimmage and run a little quarterback sneaks or whatever you want to call them. So the versatility of the offense and how we've gotten to know Ben from the other side of the microphone, man, it's going to be exciting to watch. Go in there and see his drawing board.
Yeah, no question. And I think the Bears will be able to run the ball, too, in given these situations because of light boxes. It's going to create a lot of mismatches. Brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears, our Bears Etc. podcast. The second round pick was Luther Burton III. This is an intriguing individual. Number 1 recruit in the nation in 2022. He was highly regarded right from high school in East St. Louis. This is a dynamic athlete, 6 feet, 210, 205, and the yard after the catch and the ability to work his magic as a route runner, shedding people physically. He does remind a lot of folks of DJ Moore, and he reminds a lot of folks of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I think that's probably where Ben Johnson envisions him.
Yeah, I agree. He kind of, when I look at what Ben, did in Detroit with his offense and what he's going to do in Chicago, and then another piece in place, he reminds me more inside that type of an offense of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think that they talk about a lot of quick twitch passes he has, either lateral routes at the line of scrimmage, quick hitter slants from beyond the line of scrimmage. And then you think about incorporating this guy into a play action type of game where he's going to be open immediately. And again, Ben talking about run after catch. And so I think if you can put it into his hands on the move, maybe against the third corner or a slot corner or someone that maybe is not, doesn't have the profile of Rome or DJ yet, so they're not putting the number 1 guy on him. He's going to be a guy that you may be able to take advantage of early in the season because of the coverage responsibilities that the opponents are going to put on him.
All right, let's listen in to Director of College Scouting, Breck Ackley, on Luther Burton's traits and skill set.
The excitement comes from alignment. You got a guy that scouts went and saw, electric with the ball in his hands. Everybody really liked him. Coaching staff comes in the spring, they get involved in the evaluation process, and they see it the same way we do. So to me, the excitement comes when everybody's aligned and sees the same vision for the player, and then you can certainly see him translate into our offense and getting targets.
You talk about the traits. I believe 85% of his snaps out of the slot, so
yes.
That's right in the wheelhouse of the head coach and play caller.
Ben Johnson, is it the yak? Is it the ability to escape, the contact balance, the forced missed tackles, that type of thing?
That's exactly what it is. We think he's the best rack player in this class. His ability, he can beat you with speed, he can run through you with physicality, and he can also elude you. So he's got 3 ways to win with the ball in his hand. He's a dynamic player with the ball in his hand who can separate from the slot, can also win outside. So all of that combined makes him the total package.
What kind of impression did he leave across the board?
Passion. Like, that's what I would say. Competitiveness, loves football. Like, that's what came across with him is you roll the ball out, and he loves to play football.
Toughness, I think, is a part of his makeup. Is that something that fits Ben Johnson's culture and identity right now?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's easy to see with him when you turn the tape on, the way he plays with the ball in his hand, the physicality. You know, I think it's easy to envision that in our offense, the way Coach talks about the things he's going to ask our receivers to do. I think he fits right in line with that.
And no block, no rock. So does he like to do that?
Yeah, that's absolutely part of the deal. Coach has made that very clear. That I promise you he wouldn't be on the board to be available to be picked if he wasn't doing that.
One of the first comps that came up is DJ Moore. And when you really, as soon as that hit, I'm watching the highlights. You see a lot of everything I just said, the contact balance behind the line of scrimmage. Busting tackles, going deep. Is there something there with the chemistry you can build with this group of now potent weapons that kind of fits all together?
I think that's exactly it. I think the cool thing now is the way we're structured and built is like the skill set of all of them allows them to move around and be multiple, which is what Coach is looking for, obviously. But his skill set, the route running, the ability to play inside and outside and then get him the ball in space, like it's going to be hard to cover DJ, obviously Rome's skill set, and you throw him in with now the 2 tight ends, like now you're rolling.
Ben talks about a basketball team on offense, and this individual, Luther Burton III, could have been an NBA player, couldn't he? I mean, everybody talked about he was a great basketball player. This is almost a literal thing going on here with this skill set of all these guys, right?
That's right. And that's an intentional thing. Like we talk about that. One of our jobs is not only you scout the player, but then you also have to, where does he fit in our roster and how does he produce for us? And with him, it was easy. You know, you do see the basketball type short area movements. That's what allows him to separate. That's also what allows him to make people miss with the ball in his hand. So it shows up.
All right. How would you describe off the field and a sense of getting to know him, what you learned about him, what the fans want to know what the person's all about?
Yeah, so he's a low-key guy. He's from that area, St. Louis. He's close with his family. He goes to school down the road at Columbia. Has a girlfriend that's strong in his life, but he's a low-key guy. He's just kind of a low-key good dude that likes to play football. That's the main thing I'd say about him.
A lot of high praise there for Luther. I had a chance to meet him and visit with him. Man, he's all about football, Tom. He is so dialed in and serious about where this is headed for his career. Loves being a Bear, and I just think he's taking it all in. And this guy is he's a very serious person with the leadership he's going to have there in the locker room in that group with a guy like DJ Moore, and Roma Dunze could show him the way a little bit after his rookie year and his experiences. I think it's a nice blend.
Well, every interview I hear with him after the draft, his attitude kind of sounds like mine, because I was so disappointed to be drafted in the 4th round. I always held that inside, and it motivated me. I think Luther wanted to and thought he would be drafted higher, but I think he's going to make a lot of people pay for that. And so when you come in with that kind of feeling and confidence about yourself and the way you want to go out there and perform and put your talents on display, knowing other guys passed you up, I think it's really important. So I like listening to the interviews by Luther because he's a little cantankerous about not getting picked a little bit higher.
Yeah, 39th pick in the draft, though. I think when you're top 40, man, that's quite the honor. But
I think he thought he wanted to go higher.
He no doubt, he never said this out loud, but I believe he believes and knows that he's the number 1 receiver in the draft.
So, hey, listen, I thought I was better, and I'm 63 years old, and it's still in the back of my mind. So it's not something you're ever going to lose the thought of it. It's only trying to make yourself better so people remember you.
Yeah, and his buddy and a guy who played with him in high school, not at East St. Louis, but the other high school he was there in the St. Louis area, is Jamison Williams. He calls him his little brother. And so Jamison Williams was filling him in on Ben Johnson, and Ben Johnson was getting filled in on Luther from him. So, and then, you talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown was a 4th-round pick. A 4th-round pick, and Ben Johnson has turned him into a 2-time first-team All-Pro and a 3-time Pro Bowler.
At the draft, you're only picked accordingly. It doesn't say how your career is going to turn out, because we've seen guys picked a lot higher that have kind of fizzled. Then we've seen guys that are picked a lot lower and that have flourished into Hall of Famers. So I just like Luther's attitude when he gets interviewed about how successful he wants to be.
Hey, Bears fans, Steinhoffels is a proud partner of the Chicago Bears and now open in Orland Park. Steinhoffels is Chicagoland's furniture and mattress leader with the largest selection to fit every style and budget, and is 100% employee-owned. Shop in-store and online at steinhoffels.com. All right, let's move on to the third and fourth picks of the draft for the Bears. At number 56, tackle Azie Trapillo of Boston College. And at number 62, Shamar Turner, Texas A&M defensive tackle. Two interesting big bodies at the line of scrimmage. Everybody was, and us included, talking about just beefing up the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Before we get your thoughts, let's get the perspective from Director of Player Personnel, Trey Colzio, on both of these guys.
You can't have enough big bodies, right? And so, the consistency and dependability that Azie's shown throughout his career. Obviously, Ryan and I have a lot of touch points there at BC, and, have a chance to follow his career over the past 4 years. It's been a lot of fun. So thrilled for the Bears and really happy for Azie, too.
There's probably energy in the draft room because of that, the Boston College connection. That's one thing. But you guys know that whoever comes out of BC, especially offensive line, there's a certain amount of toughness there. It's almost like a conveyor belt of that over the history of college football there. Would you agree? And is that a part of his game?
Absolutely. And I think when you look at it, the measure of consistency in his play and the dependability, so we always talk about smart, tough, dependable, right? And, you can watch Azie's game and, what you appreciate is no matter what game you turn on, everything is so consistent. It all looks very, very similar, So not only was he well coached and well prepped and all that, but just the way he plays, there's a calmness and dependability about his game, which you really admire at the tackle position.
So let's dive into the scouting part of it. So left tackle his 1 year, and then 3 at right tackle.
Yeah.
You had Jeff Hafley there, and then it was Bill O'Brien. So NFL touch point. Just give us some traits and qualities beyond the size factor and the violent play factor.
Sure. I think there's a high level of football intelligence, and that comes from all the experience that he has. He's played a ton of snaps there. Obviously, being a 3-year starter, playing on both sides. So, that speaks to the development that they've had through, a couple different systems up there at BC. So when you got a guy who, moves well for a big man and also has a high degree of football intelligence and is technically sound, it checks a lot of boxes for you at the tackle position.
Is there a game or moment that stood out that if you close your eyes, that helped you make this decision?
With somebody like Azie, I think it's, I keep using the word consistency with him, but, he had a chance to go against some really good players, and rushers coming out of the ACC over the past couple of years. And it's just impressive because it's, no matter what the task at hand, no matter who he's playing against, it all looks the same. He just finds a way to get the job done, play in and play out. So, yeah.
Did you interview him at the Combine? And if so, what impressed you about that experience?
The maturity. I mean, it felt like talking to a 5-year NFL vet, just the presence that he has as a person, the maturity, the intelligence, all that stuff to go along with the mental and physical toughness that you see with the kids.
Right.
Really impressive interview.
You got Bear boxes. I don't know if they've changed much with the new coaching staff, but we know his mentality already. How's he work with Ben Johnson and what we're building here?
I think we hit on it. I mean, this is a gritty, hard-nosed player, right? Doesn't miss time. He's been healthy. He's been durable. He's smart. He's tough. The dependability factor, I think for an offensive lineman, when you talk about the makeup, it's critically important for us, and that's something that, we've tried to make some additions in the offseason, and we love the group of guys that we have, and we're really excited to throw Azie in the mix because he's fitting the blueprint of what we're trying to establish.
Okay, motion when Shamar Turner comes aboard. He's a man who plays with a violent approach to the game. A lot of knockback in his game.
Yeah. We were thrilled that we were able to get here. Here's another guy that we've been tracking these last 2 days, and we weren't sure if he would be there, and we're absolutely thrilled because he's embodying what we're trying to do defensively with Coach Allen, and fun player to watch, man. We're thrilled to have him.
Yeah, Coach Allen likes length, right? That's just a small part of what he likes. What else does he throw on the table that fit what he's trying to look for?
Well, I think you hit it. It's violent, it's knockback, it's relentless play. But you can tell that this kid loves football by the way that he plays the game, right? So it's snap in, snap out. You know, you're going to get somebody who's going to change the line of scrimmage and give you everything he's got to empty the tank.
All right, from a scout's breakdown, break it down for me, the traits and qualities that stand out besides all of what I just said.
Yeah, so this is a guy that played some defensive end earlier in his career and then kicked inside full-time this year. So you see the athlete, but you also see explosive power coming out of his hips. You know, you see a guy who can play with low pad level and change the line of scrimmage and can overpower blockers in both the run and pass game. So I think he's still scratching the surface of his potential as he continues to feel comfortable and learn playing on the interior, but, you know, really physical, violent, aggressive, you know, everything you want in a defensive lineman.
Any standout moments, games, or stories you heard about Shamar?
Shoot, you know, you watch them, and A&M gets, you know, obviously in the SEC, he's playing against a lot of NFL caliber players week in and week out, but you know, when you cut the tape on with him, it jumps out, right? You know, who's 5? Who's that guy that's, you know, consistently knocking people back and in the backfield and chasing plays? And obviously we watch a lot of Texas A&M defensive line tape, you know, with his 2 teammates going in the last 2 days as well. So they did a heck of a job down there.
Are you looking at him, at least at the moment, Coach Allen, as a 3 technique or across the board? Because he did play many spots. And that being said, a guy like Grady Jarrett with so much experience, is that a nice guy to have him learn from a little bit here?
Absolutely. You know, Grady's the consummate pro, right? And a guy who's played at a high level for a long time. And I think the fun part with these rookies is you throw them in the fire and you see how it all shakes out in terms of where they play best, what the vision is. I know that he can play interior, and you know, I think that the more big bodies you have that you can play in the rotation, the better the Bears are going to be.
All right, Tommy, you heard the excitement in Trey's voice, a former Boston College guy himself, on Azie Trapillo. Let's take one at a time, Azie Trapillo, and then you can have Shamar Turner as well.
Look, you know, Jeff, we talked about it. I've always liked Boston College players. No matter what position they come out, they're very disciplined. Football means a lot to them. They kind of have that East Coast toughness in them. I knew Azie's dad, and I'm familiar with his bloodlines. The thing about Azie is it's kind of a develop along this Dan Skipper that played for Detroit, where you're that 6th lineman. Dan Skipper is 6'9", 330. Azie is 6'8", 317 pounds-ish. And I think when you're trying to feed some reps to a guy that you really think has the ability, the toughness, the dedication, all the kind of traits that you need to be an offensive lineman long-term in the NFL, if you can feed him those 6th lineman reps, you can put him a little bit at right tight end. You can put him a little bit at left tight end. You can put him in motion. You can put him in a scenario where he can really benefit the strength of the side that you use him. So I really think that's when you get to tap into the creativeness of a guy like Ben Johnson when you have an athlete like Azie. But it's hard to deny when you see him in pads or out of pads for the first time of how big of a man this guy is. And I think that he still has a lot, really development to go through in terms of NFL weight room, NFL dietitians, and all this stuff that he's going to benefit from when he gets to Hallis Hall.
But, you know, he will compete for a starting job.
Yeah. I know, but I'm telling you, you're always going to be competing for a starting job. That's never going to stop. But how you expedite that competition is by feeding those 5th offensive lineman reps. Get them in the game. Make it comfortable. Let them hear the crowd noise. Let them get in a stance. Let them face a defensive end. All those types of things that can speed up his development. I think it's a great option and opportunity for him.
Are aches, pains, or injuries keeping you on the sidelines? Athletico's movement experts are here to help you turn your setbacks into comebacks and create a personalized game plan for your recovery. With no prescription or referral needed, Athletico Physical Therapy is where your comeback story begins. Athletico, proud to be the official physical therapy partner of the Chicago Bears. All right, Tommy, touch on what defensive tackle Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M brings to the table. You're going to love this guy when you meet him. First of all, he sat down across from me. He never stopped moving. he was so wound up and excited about this opportunity. It just hadn't hit him yet. Even a day after, when he was like just shaking his head, he just cannot believe what has happened here. He believes in himself, but the fact that he is a Chicago Bear and the kind of physicality and violence he plays with, I think the fans are going to love him.
To me, the best thing that happened to him is coming to a team that has Grady Jarrett. Because for Bears fans that don't know a lot about Grady, and you're going to see a fast twitch muscle, you're going to see an explosive defensive tackle, you're going to see a guy that you want every defensive tackle to develop those traits that come along for the Bears. And if you're a young guy coming out of college and you are kind of the alpha male of your defensive line room, and now you're not necessarily not the alpha male, but you're learning from guys that have a world of experience at this level, and then you start understanding how to line up, how to get in more of an efficient stance, how to anticipate the snap count, how to make sure I work efficiently against a guard and a center. So all these little things that this young defensive lineman can learn from an experienced defensive lineman like Grady, I think it can speed up his learning process as well.
Do you think? I mean, he says he can play all across the defensive line. Do you think that
And he has.
Yeah, but when you think about Dio Adembo, you talk about Jervon Dexter, you talk about all the guys up front, Grady, the mixing and matching that they could do to create also, much like an offensive coordinator tries to create mismatches, can you create mismatches with the current collection of Bears, and Montez Sweat included, and Austin Booker, to get this best one-on-one matchups you possibly can up front?
You know, first of all, I think that Dio and Dexter could both play to the outside. They could play all the way to the outside shoulder, tight end to tackle. They have that type of size and athleticism. But yeah, Jeff, you know, when we played in a, you know, kind of a bad memories for me, when we went and played the Washington Redskins in 1986, they started playing a 5-man defensive line. They took out one linebacker. Now every single offensive lineman has a one-on-one matchup. There is no sliding. There is no helping. And it was something that really benefited the Washington Redskins at that point. So when you take a look at the talent that the Bears have and you said, okay, I'm going to start playing a 5-man front on third down. The Bears have the 5 caliber athletes to do that. And if now in modern day football, yeah, why doesn't everybody play the 46 defense? Because you don't have the personnel. But when you have the personnel to go out there and play a 5-man front, you could do it. And I think Dennis Allen probably in the history of his career has seen it and hopefully have done it before.
In the 4th round, Tom, Maryland linebacker Ruben Hippolyte, a 5'11", 240. The dude can fly. We know a lot about the traits. He tested very well. With the loss of Jack Sanborn off to the Dallas Cowboys, there's going to be competition for that 3rd linebacker spot.
You know, one thing I like about Hippo is he's really difficult to block. When you go back and you look at some of his tapes, he reacts so quickly that he gets in a winning position against the offensive player who's dedicated to block him. And one thing about it is you don't want linebackers that necessarily square up to big offensive linemen. You want linebackers that are on the shoulder or are giving really little contact space. And I think when you're talking about what you can do on special teams and what Dennis Allen needs out of that second tier of defensive players, the linebacker, I do think that he's a good fit for this defense. Dennis Allen wants his defensive linemen to engage and disengage quickly on the offensive linemen, so that gives these linebackers a little bit more freedom to run. And so when you talk about a guy, and I've seen a 40 attached to him at 4.39, you know, this dude can run.
All right, another 4-3, upper 4-3s. Zack Frasier out of UT San Antonio. He was a 5th-round pick for the Bears. Tall, long, bump and run corner, 6 interceptions, and had a lot of pass breakups. But is the mold of what Dennis Allen's going to want in the future. He wants to play a lot of press, and he wants speed. He wants speed everywhere on the defense.
Yeah, but I would put my desk right in Al Harris's office, because when you talk about a young player that has the length that he has, and now you have to learn the footwork that's going to put you in the best position, the quickest, and throughout the entirety of the routes you're facing. I don't think there's a better coach right now than Al Harris, because of the similarities in their size, their length, and the type of things that Al Harris had to learn from the time he went to Tampa Bay to Philly, and then how he flourished after that. So I just think that the Bears put him in a really good position to learn, develop from one of the brighter ex-playing coaching minds in the league.
And it was Al Harris who really was interested in this guy and said, hey, Ryan, hey, Ian, hey, Jeff King, let's take a look at this guy. And I think it's that smaller school attitude Al Harris came from that probably caught his attention too. What these guys have to do to get to the NFL.
And, Al's a big guy. He's the type of guy that had to learn athleticism that's going to compete at an NFL level, and then how his assets can be used on an NFL field. And so when you're taking a young guy like that has untapped potential, but he's got unique length and size, I think it's a great opportunity for, Al Harris to help him develop and grow.
And Al went to Texas A&M Kingsville on his way to the NFL, and a long career and a lot of great defensive play. All right, in the 6th round, Tommy, back in your neighborhood there, offensive guard Luke Newman out of Michigan State. Strong dude, rep 29 on the bench. During his workout, he was a Holy Cross left tackle and an FCS All-American. 1 year at Michigan State, they played him at left guard, but it was his center snaps at the East-West Shrine game that really got the Bears' attention, watching him in practice during that week and showing that he could do that. And I think that's probably where he's going to do a lot of repping.
Well, the thing that he had to show first is he could transfer his talent from Holy Cross to Michigan State in the Big Ten and compete not only on the practice field, but on the game field. And he showed all of those types of traits. And that's what starts getting you recognized, of having the talent to get invited to bowl games and then ultimately get yourself drafted. And when you go from Big Ten football and come to compete at the offensive guard position, if you're comfortable in that left-handed stance, I think that speeds up the opportunity, because if you're a right-handed guy, it still is a little bit of a transition to play out of a left-handed stance. And if he's comfortable there, I think he can come in and compete immediately.
And in the 7th round, Tom, finally they got their running back. They wanted to get one, and they did. Rutgers, Kyle Manungai. He is a durable, reliable, dependable running back at just over 5'8". The biggest stat I think that sticks out with everybody, aside from his production, is 0 fumbles and over 700 snaps.
And a willingness to pass block. You get a guy that's tough enough to carry the football without having a ball stripped out of you, or, having the reputation of a fumbler. I think it's unbelievable. But I think if you have that reputation and the willingness to stand up into the line of scrimmage and bury your head into the middle of a blitzer, I think that is one of the true talents and qualities that is difficult to teach. But if you already come in here and it's one of the things they compliment you for, it can go a long way to get you on the field.
Much like Boston College, Tommy, with the offensive linemen, the toughness of their tight ends, I think Rutgers, also tough. I think of Isaiah Pacheco running the football. I think of this guy running the football. There's just something about the edginess of those schools on the East Coast. Would you agree?
Yeah, Rutgers, it starts with their head coach. Because their head coach is an all-time tough guy. He does nothing to make these guys comfortable. He demands toughness out of him. And so I think that's a trait that every one of these guys leave their college program with.
And that would be Greg Schiano, former Bears assistant coach as well. We're brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears. All right, before we depart and dig in more to this as we go throughout the course of this offseason, let's take a look at the NFC North. Detroit drafted 4 players in the trenches and added a wide receiver in Isaac Tisla from Arkansas. Minnesota, 2 in the trenches and a wide receiver, Ty Felton, who is uber talented. Green Bay, 4 in the trenches and 2 wide receivers in their top 3 picks. Matthew Golden, the speedster, and Savion Williams, who's like a Deebo Samuel type of player that could do a lot of different things. Is everybody beefing up, I guess, because the whole division wants to run the football as well. That's a stated point. Forget about quarterback play for a minute. Just adding speed, all of them, and adding more in the trenches on each side of the ball. What does that tell you about the division and what everybody's looking at?
There's a lot of young guys that they hope that they can develop into NFL caliber offensive linemen and eventually earn and compete a job. But then you look, every single one of these teams have brought free agent veteran offensive linemen in. The Bears have brought in 3. The Minnesota Vikings brought in a center. The Green Bay Packers brought in a guard. So it's not like they've ignored the importance of the offensive line by, bringing some veterans in, but they also need they also know that at the beginning of training camp, you better have about 15 offensive linemen that are competing for those 7 to 8 game day spots.
Also on the defensive line, that the Packers went 4, 5, and 6 with defensive ends and defensive tackles. And that has been a big part of Minnesota's restructuring as well on the defensive line with Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. I mean, it's going to be I still believe, and correct me if you disagree and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's, to me, the most intriguing division in the NFL because it's going back old school a little bit here. But with the creativity of these offensive minds, whether it's the head coach calling the plays, which is in the case of three of the teams in the division, or the tough attitude of the head coach up there in Detroit. I just think it's a fascinating division.
It's all about trench warfare, Jeff. You know that. And that's what football is always going to be about. And then the creativity of the other pieces in place, that's what it's going to be.
The Miller Lite Chicago Bears draft party was a great time. We appreciate their sponsorship of it, and we'll look forward to the next one that comes along in 2026. For Tom Thayer, I'm Jeff Joniak. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please subscribe now on the Chicago Bears official app, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Bear down, everybody.